Tomas, we're back, my friend. You know what that means? Time for more Tasty Live with this man, Jamal. This week in stocks, what's up?
What's going on?
I'm doing good. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great, man. I mean, I got no complaints. It's Friday. I had two practices this week with third and fourth graders, and nobody died. So I mean, everything is good. You know what I'm saying? I mean,
see, we all got our things.
Yeah, we all got our things, man.
I can't listen to any more 12-year-old hockey or fourth grade basketball. It's too much for me.
You know what? These are the things that actually keep us sane. See, we see these weird things that go on in life and watch these little people, and we're like, you know what? We're doing well. We're doing all right.
Then we know how this is like. It teaches us how to behave with you, Sosnoff, because you have the mental capacity of a 4 to 12-year-old.
I do find it helps me with that. You know what I'm saying? I do find it helps me with that.
It shows me compassion and patience.
Yeah, it's like, oh, little guy, he's okay. He's
trying. He's trying.
You know what I mean? Yeah, you're absolutely right. See, Tone, that's good perspective.
Yep.
All right, guys, get a room. All right, what's next?
This week in stock, dude. Look, it's been fairly quiet week. I know we had the one down day, but it's been fairly quiet, and it might get a little bit more quiet next week. I got a slide on that. Let's move to the first slide here. SPX, so SPOOs and NASDAQ are at risk at breaking their 2-week up streak. Actually couldn't fit it on here, but Russell 2000 is at risk of breaking a 4-week up streak from the moves that we had basically from one day mostly this week, it would feel. And Goldman kicked off the week with some soft earnings. A lot of those banks were exactly beautiful as far as their earnings goes. Goldman had it's M&A issues, and they got a lot of high costs. So that's kind of kicking off the week and kicking off earnings so far. Crude found a bid for a consecutive week, although for me it's been kind of fair. I don't know. How do you guys feel about oil right now? Like I've been saying for a while that 80 is fair. I'm not really interested either way at 80.
Ivy ranks.
I mean, there's nobody else's either. The Ivy rank is super low. It's really, I think oil's a pretty uninteresting trade here. The only reason you'd have oil on is if you have a position on oil, it's just either you're very directional or it's just so liquid that you just want to keep something on in there.
Yeah, I agree. And even for me, like directionally, I'm not interested at 80. I don't really see a bias either way. I'd rather see it, maybe I think it was more interesting when it was 72, like whatever that was 2 weeks ago, or if it gets to 90s, sure. And then nat gas. I mean, we're looking at 19-month lows at nat gas. It seems like a lot of weather stuff hasn't materialized. It's been fairly quiet, not just here, but European natural gas too. So that's been something to keep an eye on. Although it's small, the tech and Bitcoin correlation has seemed to disappear a little bit over the last couple of days. Obviously, we saw the market drop. Bitcoin still kind of held in there, and I'm not sure if it's at 21 still right now, but it's been kind of erased that move after what we saw in FTX. And then gold, dude, gold's been strong recently. You guys playing gold?
No, Ivy ranks low there and there too.
Yeah, you're right. It has been on a tear.
See, it's funny you say this because I was actually going to start off this way. Like I remember one time this week. Tony, you asked Sauce, have you done a trade? Because it's really not a whole lot going on, right? Like that's kind of where it was. And then we were talking about different trades ahead of your podcast, by the way, which, when is the podcast again?
Every Tuesday and Thursday. It comes out around noon Central Time, possibly a little bit earlier. Catch it. It's the fastest growing podcast.
And I remember you were kind of looking around for a trade. It took a little bit too, because trades are far and few between right now, right? Because of volatility is fairly low. So that's kind of
fairly low. You got a lot of earnings plays coming now that some of these stocks are going to go through their earnings and make it a little bit easier.
Exactly. We saw the brief pop in VIX this week. I mean, it was really low, right? 18s and whatnot, but pop this week, but still sitting near that long-term average. So that's kind of where we are overall. Let's move ahead to the next slide. So you guys know me. I'm always digging around to find something interesting, something to pay attention to worth trading. This is a chart of the relationship between consumer cyclicals and consumer staples, right? So obviously you got some of the popular ones that are listed here and some of the ones that have really moved. This consumer cyclicals were just destroyed last year, obviously. Some of them have been overflated. Tesla is also in the consumer cyclicals group for those who don't really know. And so there's Amazon. This year so far, the cruise lines have been on the move, and so have some of the airlines too. Although those aren't really cyclicals. I think those are technically industrials, but whatever. A lot of the travel names have really kind of been on the move recently. And so that's something to kind of keep an eye on. Is this a trend that's going to continue? Are we going to start to see some vol pick up in either one of these? Staples have been kind of ugly to start the year. So I've been looking at this trend to kind of as something maybe possibly interesting. As you can see, the performance so far, cyclicals have been outpacing consumer staples, but something to keep an eye on.
Got it.
Let's move ahead to the next slide. Copper, man. You got a copper play on or what? Copper's been making a move recently.
I don't.
Look at it?
I don't
trade. Have you looked at it or something?
I don't trade copper that much. I don't trade the futures ever at all, but like we'll trade some copper stocks.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit, but we haven't. I'll check it out now. I haven't put anything on in there.
I mean, just like most other stocks, the bids are low. The only ones I can think of off the top of my head are FCX, which IVR is very low in there, and then SCCO. And I had to look it up the other day. I remember that being a copper stock, but as I'm nearing a while in the business, tickers change sometimes, right? And so I was like, wait, is this still a copper stock? I had to pull it up, but SCCO is still a copper stock. And that's those are the only few. But yeah, overall, I've just been looking at the commodity itself. It's been on the move more recently. A lot of people attributing it to China coming back online. So
yeah, I don't think we've ever traded SCCO, Southern Copper Corp.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever traded that. FCX, of course we have, and copper we have, but copper's never a big play for us. Yeah, not.
All right, just bringing it up. Let's move to the next slide.
It's legit. It's legit. It's never done it.
VIX has been retreating as the dollar's been retreating. So this has been a trend to watch. Will this eventually turn around and pick up again, or will this decouple? Will this not be as much of a story this year? That's how these things go. Sometimes we watch a trend in January that by the time we get to December might be very different. But of course, over the last year, dollar was wreaking havoc and VIX was bid too. But we've seen both of these kind of fall off. So it's another trend I'm keeping an eye on.
Yeah, I think the best plays on the board as we got into the middle of last year, which did work out for us, were, being short dollar and being short volatility, both came in.
Yeah, big time.
Yeah.
Let's move ahead one. So what's going to happen next week? This is the forward curve for SPY. Next 5 days, you can see looking fairly quiet. I mean, there's really no big data outside of earnings, right? And I believe you guys did a piece this week on what happens with overall volatility in the market when earnings happens. And I don't think there's much of a correlation, which makes sense. I mean, there's so much going on. It's hard to determine whether or not that affects the VIX overall, but it looks like it's fairly quiet next week. Of course, that doesn't necessarily mean anything until it actually happens. And then after that, of course, we got the Fed meeting coming up on the 1st, February 1st. And then we got the non-farm payrolls the Friday after, not next Friday, obviously 2 weeks from now. So those are the main two big events we got coming up in recent time periods. But, again, just because it's going to be quiet doesn't mean, for those of you who love to go out there and sell zero DTE options in front month just because nothing's going on. Be careful about that. Always, kind of be diligent.
And when you least expect it for sure.
Yeah, for sure. So let's move ahead. $1.3 trillion worth of options are going to expire today. Apparently, it's the largest non-quarterly index OPEX on record. That's a little surprising, but also not that surprising that there's so many options in Jan. For those who don't really know, Jan is the longest. It's around the longest month, right? It's one of our leaps. So it's around for so long. A lot of people put on positions and have them for a long time. So there's going to be a lot of things expiring today, but didn't realize it's the largest non-quarterly index OPEX on record.
Yeah, Tony and I were talking about this. We didn't know the exact number, but we thought it would be one of the largest ever, just because of how many options trade now, and because January is always the largest.
Yeah, and I feel like
around the longest.
It's around the longest, and when you have such a reset like we did last year, right? There's just probably a lot of people who just sort of have options that they couldn't really do anything with that are about to expire. Similar to the Fed, the ECB is considering a downshift in rate policy. We kind of feel like we're not going to get as the big rate hikes, the 50 basis points, 70 basis points. Those seem to be done. We're still going to get the 25. From what I understand, we're probably going to get as it looks right now, if you look at that Fed Watch tool, 25 basis points in Feb, 25 basis points in March, and then theoretically we might not have one in May, but we'll see what ends up happening. ECB is considering just doing 25 as well. They're starting to calm down. Seems like inflation is coming in based on some reports that we're seeing. So something to keep an eye on. 97 stocks will report earnings this week. So we do have a lot that's going to occur, right? We got Microsoft, Visa, Tesla, MasterCard, Chevron, among other names. So there are going to be a lot of stocks reporting earnings next week.
IBM, Tesla, both on Wednesday, Intel Thursday. Yeah, you've got a plethora. You already mentioned Microsoft on Tuesday, but you got a plethora of earnings coming next week.
What do you think this earnings season is going to be like, though? I mean, already looking at
it's going to be a test for Sosnoff because he's going to have positions in most of these stocks, and he's going to have to go with his I'm going to close some, which is very hard for him to do. So we'll see.
I think it's going to be a pretty positive earnings session.
Do you think majority of the moves may be inside? Because when I think back to last year, not so much a year ago this time, but obviously we know in April when a lot of stuff reset, right? Like big moves, right? And so it's, I think I'm going to go on record and say it might be a little easier to sell some earnings around this time around, but we'll see. I don't think there's going to be as many crazy moves, but we'll see. We'll see.
I think you're right, but we'll see.
Chinese New Year's coming up, actually starting basically tomorrow through the 29th. So volume could be a little lighter, especially in the Chinese stocks. Your add on that? I remember one year, it's not so much for the Chinese New Year, it's coming out of it, right? So I remember some years in the past where Chinese New Year happens, it's quiet, not necessarily quiet, but that week occurs. And then the week after, there was a lot of movement, a lot of volatility, not maybe somewhat in our market and definitely with those Chinese names. So it's the only reason why I bring it up. These names might be kind of quiet, but who knows, the Babas and the Baidus of the world the week after might be a little perky, maybe, or not, or. Well,
Baba started the year around 90. It's almost 120. It's on a $30 rally. I mean, that's 30% or more in the first, couple of weeks of the year. I mean, if it sat here, I would be fine, right? I mean, it'd still be a decent move. Baba did the same thing, 113 to 132, and that's off of its highs of 140. So it was up almost $30 at one point also. So that's a movers, JD. They're all movers.
Oh, it sucks.
Good to go? Did you lose me or did we lose Jamal?
I think he froze.
Awesome. Don't worry about it. We'll take a quick 90-second break. We'll come back. I'll get the last word here. Opening bell next is Tasty Live.